Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an Iron Seas special. Today,
Me.
Joe, Mr. and Mrs. Evelyn Music, and I are going to be discussing Brandon Sanderson's secret project number 3, I believe. And that is the Frugal Wizard's Guide to Surviving Medieval England. A bit of a mouthful on that title.
Handbook, not guide.
Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry. I don't have it in front of me, man.
Roll it back. Do it again.
No, I'm not starting it again. How dare you? We will be reading Brandon Sanderson's never mind. Screw it. You messed me up.
we get the idea. The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England. It's a review by Brandon Sanderson. And the synopsis by Mrs. Evelyn Music.
Yes. So this is what the book itself does for the synopsis. A man awakes in the clearing in what appears to be medieval England with no memory of who he is, where he came from, or why he is there. Chased by a group from his own time, his sole hope for survival lies in regaining his missing memories, making allies among the locals, and perhaps even trusting in their superstitious boasts. His only help from the real world should have been a guidebook entitled The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England, except his copy exploded during transit. The few fragments he managed to save provide clues to his situation, but can he figure them out in time to survive?
Ooh. So I will mention this reading is part of our book club. If you would like to join us, the Discord link is in the chat. And we'll be doing this like every month or so, or every 2 months, however often we can finish book and kind of read it. But yeah, you can hang out with the Discord, join us, and join in on the fun. So initial thoughts, guys. Kahuna, what was your initial thought of this one? The third project.
Initial thought. I think the worst Brandon Sanderson. I'm not saying this is the worst, but I think the worst Brandon Sanderson book is still better and more inventive than most of the fantasy slop coming out of the mainstream these days. And I know probably a few of us are going to have some very low opinions on this book in regards to our list of Sanderson overall. But there was, while I don't like the recent trend in some of Sanderson's books of having kind of these weak, non-heroic men as protagonists and main characters, there was something relatable about this book. Because there's all been times in our life, I think, where we felt, and in fact have been, a bit of a loser. And I think this speaks to that pretty well, except for Justin, because he's perfect anyway. But yeah, that's my.
I never felt like a loser.
Have you looked in? No, never
mind. What are you talking about, Mr. and Mrs. Epley? Opinions. Initial thoughts.
Yeah, I think Kahuna said it well. So based on some of the things Justin said, I had a feeling that most on the call today are not going to have very great things to say about the book, but I enjoyed a lot of parts about it. I agree that I thought it was very inventive. I thought that some of the things they alluded to, I was actually more interested to hear about than the story he actually told. That was going to be one of my comments, but I enjoyed reading it. So
yeah,
I thought it started off fine, and I was like, okay, these ideas are interesting, but as it dragged on, I felt like it dragged on, and I was just ready for it to be over. Like, the initial premise was neat, but the more I learned about what was happening, the less I cared.
I think part of that is the way that it's written, the perception the main character has, because he has lost his memory. It's a white room kind of story. Mm-hmm. And that will, like, some people would have just preferred that he was a good guy trying to be like.
I don't think that's it, but I don't really think that's it. We've had losers as protagonists books before, and they're better. But my thoughts on it, right, is this book is Brandon Sanderson's worst book by a large margin, and even by the typical author, I think it's mediocre at best.
Ooh,
I first reading this, the cover, the cover hinting at what it is, and kind of the isekai story that it was going for in the beginning, I was like, I'm probably going to really like this.
Nani?
Sanderson tends to make me laugh when he tells jokes in his books, and this seemed to be more the comedy heavy book rather than his other books. And it kind of just made me realize that Sanderson's not really fit for like comedy. Like he can tell a joke here and there,
But Joe,
not,
you're not funny at all. You've never done anything comedic, obviously. What do you have to say?
Sure. Sure. No, it was a disappointment because he's been funnier in a lot of books, and I think that I'm not wrong to say that this was more aiming for a comedic like tone, right?
No, for
I
sure. It
agree.
was a little looser. It's not connected to the Cosmere, and he's a little freer to make fun of things. He's able to draw more comparisons to like normal life, obviously, because of the setting and the characters. I thought the humor worked a good portion of the time, and maybe not everyone agreed, but that was just me.
Yeah, it didn't make me
Swing and a miss.
laugh. It didn't make me laugh out loud, but I appreciate that it was trying to make me laugh, and some of the stuff brought a smile to my face.
I appreciate the effort.
So yeah, some of it was like it was stupid, but I don't know. I don't mind that for some reason. I don't know why dumb humor doesn't bother me. Like there's one line where he's like, "I woke up. The others were standing on the ceiling. Wait, that's not right." It's like,
Yeah.
I must have been upside down or whatever. I was like,
Well, and I
like. Oh,
appreciated-
go ahead.
Sorry, I appreciated the line where he said his nanites were trying to connect to the web for the troubleshooting page and they had no internet, because I've had that happen when I'm somewhere without internet and I try to click on an FAQ and then I can't get any answers, so I could relate to that.
And your nanites also
No.
didn't work.
yeah,
Yes,
it's
my
weird.
nanites, you know. But I think that with the secret projects, he's been trying to do a lot more humor, because with the exception of Sunlit Man, Wit brought a lot of humor into the other two secret project books that I don't think is there as much in his like full-blown novels.
Yeah, especially like in Tress of the Emerald Sea, Wit being
Again,
witless in that book.
failed.
Chuckle. I disagree, Joe. That's okay.
There
We're
were
not
no.
all
I mean,
right like me.
Tress wasn't bad, but like compared to this one, I kind of like had a lot of like I guess issues with just more about how not entertaining it was. It was just kind of crazy. It was drastic for me for reading a Sanderson book. The whole like in between stuff with the female voice actress Kate Redding, I think, reading like the rules and stuff, what's actually in the book. I thought it was really funny at first, and then everything after, I'm just like, it's the same joke, guys. I get it. Trademark, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's you're overly explaining this world I kind of don't really care about.
Corporate disclaimers, just like this is not an actual representation of what's actually happening in the. I do like that, but I do think it was overdone. Just
well, right, yeah, it was like funny the first time. It was like haha corporation, but like he didn't try to like really do any actual spins on the comedy in that aspect, and it just became very repetitive. Where it's just like after like the third time it was playing, I'm like, just come on, just get back to the story. And then the story I didn't really care about, which we should probably talk more about that. But
it was definitely not as much of like an action-packed kind of. It was more a more contemplative story than maybe some of us are used to. But what do you think?
I don't. It
Justin?
stops.
I liked the book, you son of a gun.
Well,
I will.
Well, I know,
will
but
read it
we
like I
always
liked
use
it.
the excuse. It's like, oh, we're just not used to it. I'm like, stop.
It's true.
Saying that. It's not. It has nothing to do with it.
You only started reading like
just-
Dr. Seuss 2 years ago, and now you're here.
I just read was it The Emperor's Soul, which there's really like no action in that. I don't think there's any action in it. I'm like, this is great. This is super engaging and super entertaining.
It's a cool story. Yeah.
I don't need action for there to be
I
entertainment.
mostly read nonfiction like my whole life. Some of it was pretty dense. I don't know. I just some things just don't connect. Like all the pieces can be there. It reminds me of like Mystery Men or Kung Pao. It should have appealed to me on paper, but some things just don't connect with you for some reason. I don't know.
Mystery Men didn't connect with me the way I thought it would either. Like on paper, perfect. In practice,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
That's how I felt with this book. The premise sounded fun and interesting and all that. The cover's neat and the writing is, I mean, like you said, his writing is, I think it's pretty good. It's trying to be entertaining. It didn't hook me. If somebody told me like,
it's also a first person perspective, which he doesn't. He like most of the time he writes in third person, with the exception of the Skyward series.
Skyward series, and I read all of his Skyward series.
I haven't read
really
book 4.
enjoyed Skyward series. Yeah, I think either I don't need to go on that, but so I mean, it starts off. He's essentially isekai'd into a world he doesn't know what he's doing there. He's not exactly sure why or anything like that, what's going on. He just kind of notices it's a really old New England, and he's got part of a book that kind of describes what's going on with this place. One of the first things
retarded Jason Bourne approach he takes to everything is like, I have all these skills.
Yeah.
What am I? Some sort of super cop?
Well, okay, big part of that, right? Because like there's this whole mystery that's going on, and I couldn't help but think that he's done this pretty much exact same mystery before, just way better in Warbreaker. You knew right from the get-go, I'm like, yeah, he's not going to be a cop. Like, it's just that's not going to be the case. That's
how did he do this exact same? I'm reading Warbreaker right now. What mystery?
No, I didn't say anything. I didn't read Warbreaker already. My bad.
Yeah, I've read.
So I'm gonna get right.
No,
off
I
of
have
that.
read it. I have read it. I'm challenging your opinion.
Oh, because it's like the whole time he's hinting, doing a bunch of red herrings to being like, I'm a cop. I must be. I must be some kind of detective. And they were doing similar type of
yeah,
like with Light Song, and then turns out he's not. And so I guess he technically went to the police academy, but he wasn't a cop. But no, he's like rating things.
They are kind of similar characters in a way, aren't they? Like, I think Light Song is more like, people like Light Song more. I certainly do.
Oh yeah,
than John West. Even though John West sounds like it's like at first he's I'm John West, work for Seattle PD, and then he's like, hey Johnny, you loser, your door guy, get over here.
But so like the first thing he starts doing, like the first thing to take note of, is that he's ranking everything. And I'm like, this has to be a clue to something, right? This has to be. Like, that's just such a weird quirk. So I'm thinking like, maybe he's a tester. Maybe he's a universe tester, and he got like sent to like a bad universe.
I thought he might be like a YouTuber.
Yeah, or something.
Just like a reviewer of just like products. And this is just another product review, yeah.
But it had nothing to do. It was just a red herring. And I'm like, I'm sorry. That's a really dumb red herring. That like was just retarded, honestly. Because I'm like, nobody, like, even reviewers though, what kind of a reviewer just randomly goes like to rant like, tree. That's a 4 out of 5 tree. Like,
actually, if you started doing that in your life from now on, it would be pretty funny.
Yeah.
This
tester
conversation with Joe, 3 out of 10. I don't know.
How's that milk? This milk is delicious. Perfect temperature. 5 out of 5.
Just the right cinnamon. Just the right.
You put cinnamon in your milk. Did you warm it up?
Chai.
Too? Oh,
it's chai. Yeah.
Okay. I thought you had just.
It's just very cinnamon tip flavored. No, I mean, so that's why I was thinking like, and I'm not saying it has to be this, obviously, but like a tester would have made sense, because then it's like, they're testing all the things in this universe to be able to report back, right? I think like maybe a YouTuber would have made sense as well, because they could be doing a review.
I did. It's
one of those things like that twist or like finding out that red heron was a big nothing burger was really, really upsetting to me.
I do think he's trying a little too hard in some of his mystery stories to try to put us off the scent, so to say. Like having read, like you guys, like Joe, you've read almost as many as I have. Grace, you've probably read at least as many as I have. Do you kind of get that sense too? Like maybe sometimes he's tries too hard to put people off the scent of a mystery.
Yeah. I think so, because I didn't feel that way when I read his older stuff, but I feel that more now that I'm reading more of the new stuff that's coming out. So I think that he's maybe even getting inside his own head a little bit, you know.
I think he's also having a lot more beta reading.
Oh my gosh! If you listen to the list of readers, yeah,
I think it's helpful to a point, but it starts to make it feel like it's written by committee a little bit more than it should be. Mm-hmm. I think maybe if he can, he needs to try to dial that back a little bit. I know at this point it is a whole company that's making these stories, and that's how they get produced as fast and as well as they are. But I do want to feel a little less like what feels like interference in some of the stories. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's just my own personal opinion, though. And so yeah, what did you guys think of the characters overall? I liked some of I liked a lot of some of the side characters quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like the leader of the town. I'm trying to remember his name, like Alstrom or something. Alstrom. Is it Alstrom? Almond?
Yeah,
Almond?
Oh my
something like that. Yeah,
The leader of town, Almond.
yeah, yeah. Like the part he's in, he's like in the part of England where it's like Vikings were like taking over or took over a large portion, but they're also their gods and everything are slightly different. Like instead of
Eelston, that's his
Odin,
name.
it's Woden.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it makes sense if it's an equivalent kind of like it's not quite the same, but it's a similar path down history. It does make sense that some things would be a little bit different. I do like the creative combination of magic and sci-fi in this story because it does feel like both to a point. And it's and I like the way he represents nanites. Nanites are like kind of a solve all problem in most like sci-fi fiction, and I hate that. In this, like they are strong, but they are limited in what they can do, which I appreciate.
Mhm. And I liked how he was playing around with the idea that science could seem like magic to somebody who has not been introduced to that level of science. I mean, it's not like that's something new, but I thought it was a fun thing to throw in there. And then at the very end, when Logna is doing the epilogue, and she suggests that she and her brother and her kin had come from another universe as well, it made me wonder if some aspect of the magic that they brought into that universe was actually some sort of science or something like that
Technology or
they hadn't figured out yet, so
or that maybe they've even forgotten because they've lived so
right.
long. It's
I'm not gonna lie, I totally didn't even realize. I think that I heard something about that, but I was like, I should rewind, and I'm like, I don't care. It's just like I don't care.
Yeah, man.
Let me
I was
just
right
fix
there
the
with you.
book.
guys,
It
I
was
think this
probably the
points to
same
one
thing.
thing, and that is this is a smear job. He obviously didn't read it. This is
You
he's full
troll.
of it. He doesn't
Yeah.
actually read books. He
No.
just judges them.
I'm on the
Really,
same page,
it's
man.
a bad faith opinion as well.
There was a section in there where I was doing something else while I was listening to it, as I tend to be, and I started daydreaming, and I did the same thing. I was like, oh, I wonder if I missed anything in those last 5
Yeah.
minutes. I was like, I don't care, and just kept letting it go. At one point,
I daydream sometimes in good books too, but like I'll rewind because I'm whoa,
Yeah.
I can't miss that. But if
Yeah,
I really don't care about the book, I'm just gonna be like, well, maybe it's better that I daydream through that.
Yeah.
Well-
Yeah, no, I think it's like one of these weird issues where it's like the world is different than ours, but not like enough to be interesting. And I don't know, it just is weird. I just didn't care about the world whatsoever. It just was
Yep.
slightly different than ours. I don't know.
I liked
Sorry,
the
you guys are crazy.
difference in characters. I liked a lot. I liked a lot of the side characters. That's what I'll say. I don't always like in some of these secret projects. Like I'll say Yumi is a good example. I did not love a lot of the side characters in Yumi.
Mhm.
I did like a lot of the side characters in this. I liked Logna. I liked Eelston. I liked the Arabic Christian guy. I thought he was dope. And Cephawin?
Cephawin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Cephawin. That's a weird spelling. I looked it up. I'm like, I have no idea how. Okay, so it's Sefawinn. Anyway.
Oh,
Yeah. What did you guys think of the side characters overall?
Yeah, I liked them. Alston was my favorite out of them. I liked that. I feel like, especially lately, Sanderson has a tendency of having, especially his female characters, be a little too capable. Like they're able to just kind of succeed a little too easily.
There has been
And
that tendency, yeah.
I felt that way a little bit at the end when Cephawin does her boasts against Woden and encourages the whites to rise up. But I thought he towed the line enough with her and kind of her insecurities and getting to that point that I found her more believable than some of his other female
Because
characters. Like
she
that,
wasn't perfect to start. She was struggling, and she basically saw herself as what essentially she was being, a fraud. And that
Mhm.
was something they actually connected with. I thought that part of their connection and relationship made a lot of sense. At least that was
Mhm.
just my own experience.
Yeah, I agree.
What about you, Joe? What did you think of our side characters?
they weren't bad. I just none of them like
Bad
really cared. I didn't really care too much about any of them, and it's just like the main character, man. I just like I'm like I really would have been
Check.
like the problem with the main character is just like, can we pick anyone else? This
I
guy's just
know.
not entertaining.
Oh.
He's like his whole story and everything is boring. Every time I found out more about his story, I just was like, yeah, I get it. You're supposed to be lame and uninteresting, but I'm like, cool. Can we go to somebody else's story? I literally don't understand the purpose that you have this universe and you're writing this story in this universe. I feel like there's a billion other interesting stories happening within this stories universes, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. None of them particularly care. Like they just, I don't know. The town leader, I guess he was kind of cool, but I don't know. None of them really suck.
The main character for me, like you said, total wiener, and he dragged down any joy I had from other characters in it. So there was moments here and there where I was like, oh, okay, but then he would go back to being himself, and I'm just like,
I think though Sanderson has a tendency to do that, right? Because I feel that way about Cal sometimes, to be quite honest, in the Stormlight archive.
In book 4, it definitely felt.
Yeah. So I think he plays around with those sort of the not typical hero kind of characters a lot, where they just have a lot of weakness and they have to overcome that to do what they need to do. So I'm not saying that it didn't get annoying, but I don't think it's like he hasn't done this before, or we haven't seen it before from him.
I have one big problem with it, and it's not like individually in the book doesn't bother me. Like John Smith, what's his name? I can't remember.
West.
West, that's it. John West, another very normal name. In this story, it wouldn't bother me by itself, but it feels like he's done the same thing to the male characters in 3 of the 4 secret projects in a row, and it starts to look a lot like a pattern. Like, oh, look at all these. Like, these aren't your typical hero. They're kind of a loser, just like the rest of you. And I'm kind of I don't like it when it's bang 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 in a row. Yeah. Individually, but the guy from Yumi, I like him, but same kind of thing. He's kind of a loser. He has a complicated.
But he really wasn't, though.
Yeah, he kind of was, though.
He had reasons,
but it was for his bad choices, but he
had real talent. Choices. Yeah, but he had real talent, though. You know what I mean?
And so does John West.
Oh no, he has mediocre talent. He can kind of draw. Which I like that aspect. I did like how everybody was kind of really intrigued by his drawing ability, because just from the method of perspective, I thought that was an interesting that was added in there. It just, again, it was not enough, and I'm still like, I don't know. I'm forgetting, but like, there's just so many things that just annoy me about the main character, where I'm just like, just somebody else, please. Let's make him endearing if he's a loser, you know?
Yeah.
I do think slowly revealing that he's more of a loser than we thought. It's constantly changing the perspective of the character that we are following, and in the first person, that can be a little bit jarring. That's something I'll give you. It's the only thing I'll give you, but it's something I'll give you.
Whenever he has that moment, I can't remember the other guy that he runs into then, who's like the bad guy.
Ulrich?
Is that his name? Okay, that one.
Yeah, it was Ulrich.
Yeah. Okay.
He sounds like he's from the world that they inhabit, that they stole.
But there's like that, they reveal all their history and all that stuff, and he's like, and you call me Johnny, like it's the worst nickname on the planet. Take your name and add a Y. It's like it's not like your nickname is a nickname for you, is like moron or like
I give more crap to Justin, so he's like, going about using a girl's name.
Johnny, my name is
John.
It's like, oh, somebody punch this guy.
Are you talking about when they say that Ryan always calls him Johnny?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. You see, I think that you read that wrong, because the thing he was upset about with that was that he thought Ryan was his friend, and he was never his friend enough to even realize that that's not what he called himself, that he was the only one that called himself that. So I think it was more him realizing
Ryan.
I think that was some
we can all agree
BS.
Ryan is a shitty friend.
Yeah.
I think it was some woke BS being like, he didn't even ask me how I preferred to be called.
I don't think it was a woke
nickname, dude. It's your buddy. Who cares?
You guys call me Battsauce. Do you think I called Battsauce?
Right.
You never even asked me if I want to be called Battsauce or Battsauce. You just call me Battsauce. Like, oh my god, call you Johnny. He never asked you. He just started calling you Johnny.
I mean, seriously, Josephine. No.
Doesn't he know? Like, that's like this. Like, some people I know that are like, you know, they're like me. Their full name is Joseph, right? And then somebody goes to call him Joe, and they're like, no, it's Joseph. No. Like, what?
It's only ever Joseph. The whole thing.
It's only Joseph.
I do that with my name, though. Actually, I hate
What?
going back. If anyone calls me Chris, I really don't like it. I really dislike
I respond to Jason. I respond to Chris. I
Chris.
respond to Austin, Dustin. As long as they're talking in a nice way to me, I don't. Yeah, I don't. Who
Yeah,
cares?
Justin, you and I have
You
talked
guys-
about this for years, like
Yeah.
how everybody calls you the wrong name. You
Yeah, I've just
kind of
gotten to
look
the
like
point.
Chris. You kind of look like a Jason.
I stopped correcting people. I'm just like, they're talking to me. They're being nice. I'm like, what do you need? You know, it's like, who cares? Oh wait, this
Well,
guy.
at
'cause he's
least
tough.
just
That's who
say
cares.
it.
But
At
if
least
it
just
was
say,
who
like,
was
hey, stop
supposed
calling me
to be your
Johnny.
best friend that was calling you by the wrong name your entire life.
He gave
You would
you a
feel
But he
Okay.
never said
Johnny?
anything.
He wasn't
But it-
calling him like I don't know, Jeff.
It
or
wasn't
something.
supposed to be a nickname, though. He tells Cephalin at one point his name is Johnny, not that his nickname is Johnny. He says his name is Johnny when she keeps calling him Elf. So I don't know. I don't think that that's a fair.
I don't know.
Or Eeld.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
I
was
don't know.
fun trying
I'm
to figure out like
To
what's
me,
the
it was
best little
to
word
me
for
it was a dead name situation. That's honestly how I read that. It was that
I
like
mentioned that.
he's calling me by a name that I don't identify with.
Mhm.
It was
And
not.
I
a work
wouldn't
thing. You
say
were
that if it
smoking
wasn't for the
something,
fact
dude.
that all of these secret projects had one thing in there that was like overtly being like, yeah, this is LGBT propaganda.
I don't think this was. I think I there have been things that are like that. I do not think this is one of them. That's my.
I don't know. There was a couple things that to me felt sort of like, why is that? And they're like on that one thing. It's like chapter 7. Did I just do a colonialism? And I'm like,
Oh no!
Yeah.
like,
No,
okay,
I
I see
forgot
what's
about
happening
that.
here.
That was
yeah, dude.
I
saw
like
that
it because
chapter before I even read like title, and I was like, no, please, Justin's gonna hate this.
I thought it was funny because they actually had options for each different and like, do you want to conquer certain people? We have packages for that too. And it's like it's mentioned on the back end, so it's not as prominent, but I did think it was funny. Basically, we have a package for everyone, regardless of what your political stance is. Because then they also like go on to justify like, oh well, according to the government, like we like our laws don't apply to these people because that would be wrong. So if you want to go and conquer all of them, you can.
It was definitely it was done in a comedic way, but it was definitely inserting modern politics into the book.
Yeah,
like
that's how
100%. That was
But
that
this
was
also
when I read that
isn't, like,
title, I cringed really hard.
This also isn't like a straight fantasy. This is based out of like a slightly future version of our world. No,
There was
Justin,
one-
you don't get. I'm kidding.
There was one more too.
I knew you were gonna bring this one up.
Yeah, the one, the girl, was it Cephalin? Says she's like, oh, you have very feminine hands. He's like, feminine hands. Hey, that's an insult. What do you mean? She's like, no. Some people can have soft hands and do wonderful. I'm like,
You're an Eeld.
I don't remember that line, but you know.
Oh yeah, because he has no beard and
how does he have feminine hands?
Because he's an
He's
artist.
a boxer.
He's also an I see. I don't get it either. He
interesting.
Like
But his nanites would have kept his hands perfect.
Okay, that's
yeah
true.
yeah
So-
just like they kept his
He
face
fills his
clean.
gloves
and
with
the baby mask.
moisturizer, probably.
well, then he could have been like, oh yeah, well, you know, technology.
Again, I
sorry.
also I'm going to praise the use of nanites in this. I like the technology they show. I actually like because it's not
You know what?
overpowered sci-fi BS.
You know what?
like
I'm gonna
I
say it.
tend to see.
I'm gonna say it. I didn't like the nanites.
Oh wow, really?
You're gay.
Didn't care for it.
Why?
I don't know. I didn't really
Oh.
particularly care for it or anything. I don't know. It's just it was nanites. I don't know.
I like nanites.
It is too much of a DSX.
It wasn't
they're-
though. The nanites in have you like in almost any sci-fi story, if they have nanites, they're like a solve all like click button.
Right.
Like it
It
solves
reminded
every
me-
problem. These are limited.
Yeah, it felt more
Yeah.
like a video game, which I love video games. So it felt like you get hurt, and if you can get out of combat long enough, you slowly recover. I'm like, I like those
It's like
mechanics. pretty
stamina
much
or
anytime
X
they
or
pop up.
like or MP. It's like it
Yeah,
recovers
they're-
over time, but it's not.
they're
it's not
so second nature to me that whenever they pop up, I'm like, oh, I'm familiar with this thing because from gaming, so I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
And like you said, they weren't overpowered. It wasn't just like he gets stabbed through the heart and his head gets cut off, and he's like, don't worry, nanites or something. They were limited in a good way, I thought.
and it's like
Well-
like he gives a bunch of his nanites to Aelstrom or whatever his name is, and it's like,
Aelstrom.
oh well, it's going to take you like 48 hours of eating and waiting for them to replicate and like repopulate your system, so you're not your functions aren't going to be the same as normal.
Mhm.
Yeah. I will say one thing that I did like is when because part of his tech, I guess, like the protection stuff, plating, was locked behind a password that he had no ability to ever get.
That was
And then
that's such a mean thing to do.
yeah. Well, and then when he's fighting against the guy, and then he's like, "Wait, like luck. This world is lucky, right?" That was like the thing
Mhm.
that's off by this world. So he tricks the guy into thinking like, "I guessed it." I like that. I thought that was a
Yeah.
good use of the
Oh,
storytelling and all.
he
Yeah.
bluffs it. He
Yeah.
bluffs, and it makes sense. They would believe it was possible. I like later when Loden
Right.
is like, if he'd let me do it, I probably would have gotten
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
It's like, wait
Yeah.
a second.
Yeah, the fight at the end was enjoyable. I remember
Yeah.
being bored
Yeah.
and not caring, and then once they got into the fight, I'm like, oh, I started getting re-engaged. But it's probably because I was like, oh, it's like a video game again. I'm like, ooh.
Oh,
in real life.
something I also appreciate is because at first it just seems like a very ordinary like world. This is like, oh, we're on a fun adventure with Johnny, and he's in this random alternate dimension, and then it's like, oh wait, there is something magical happening here, like that kind of OS moment where he's like, oh wait a second, I can't explain this. This is becoming very hard for me to quantify and like
Mhm.
explain away, basically, at some point.
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't know. I felt like if you're going to use this world, though, like I felt like it would have been better use if the character was more integral into the world. Why else use this multiverse world then? Either that or just make the character's story somewhat more interesting somehow, and his tie to being in a different world better.
Yeah, if you
Like-
can't
like-
buy into this character, this book is not going to be not going to be nearly as enjoyable a read.
What's
I will
so,
agree with that.
so funny about that too is oh heck, what was the book that we read with the it was Shad's book. Well, I can't remember. It was Shadow the
Shadow
Conqueror.
of the Conqueror.
Shadow of the Conqueror.
You know, talk about an MC main character. It's hard to get behind, and I'm like, but you could. And that guy's like the worst person ever, and yet that was easier to get behind than this guy. So
Well,
I
it's
don't know.
because he's not like he has a lot of bad qualities, but he has a lot of really strong good qualities too. It's like
Well, he was an
he's
interesting
very-
character.
He's very capable. He's very strong and intelligent and driven.
I
But then
guess
he's
that was
also
it.
like really big piece of shit.
I like when they
Forget
revealed
language.
that, like, oh, actually, your wife that you thought was dead has actually been cheating on you with your with your best friend. I was like, okay, I should be feeling sympathy or whatever. I just was
Should
like,
be.
of course, you're
Uh-huh.
like, this happened to you. I'm like, okay. I'm like,
Yep.
dude, I just need something, man. Like
I
don't
ended
know.
up hating her more than the gangsters. What
Oh, absolutely. But it's just like I just
dude.
But I was so not tied. Like it was at the end, right? I'm so not tied with this world, the character, and I'm just like, okay, I hate this person too. Like at least you were just like you felt like you could be like, okay, his love died, right? And that was like something sympathetic to the main character, but they took it away from him, and I'm just like, now like it's sympathy in a different way, but I'm just kind of like, okay, now this person's here. Can we punch her in the face? I'm like, I'm just annoyed. I'm like, just stop.
Get some help.
Yeah.
No,
say-
and with her, like what pissed me, like her doing that, yeah, terrible person. But that my main problem was that she was just like so nonchalantly like passing the blame. It's like, oh, I didn't actually
Ugh.
say that. My grandmother said that I told you I was dead, and I just didn't correct her because it was easier. I'm like, you, wow, that's cool.
It's
That's
just-
a move, dude.
Did it feel like unrealistic too? Like that's
No,
like I know that there's psychotic people, but I'm like,
I married
like,
one. It's
that's-
not unrealistic. They exist very frequently.
but no, but I mean like pretending that they're dead.
Well,
She,
because she was in a different dimension, I think I
And
could buy it
undercover.
more because that would seem like you were dead in the
and she
world
was
that you were actually
undercover
in.
helping with a police investigation, which kind of I buy it, but that's just me.
But
I don't
what's
hate
up with
stories
Coppin?
as much as Joe does.
I don't know, like she's a cop. I mean, I get it. Cops can be shitty people. There was just too much. I don't know. I'm just
Yeah.
like, I don't know what to do with this information. Thank you.
Well, I will
Like-
say one thing that I liked and wished that he would delve into more is all the references to the black bear and the history
Oh
there.
yeah, it
and
sounds like there could be a sequel to this book or a
right,
prequel
and
or
that to
something.
me could be much more interesting. Like that's the story I want.
No, Joe, no.
Like, truth be told, I'd almost prefer a story about one of the successful wizards who like goes into a world and just like, ha ha, magic. I'd
Well,
almost
that was the
prefer a
thing.
story like that. Yeah.
Because that's what I was like, I'm gonna really like enjoy this world because it's very much like Sword in the Stone, that cartoon where it's just like obviously the wizard is from our timeline, you know, and it's just like it's kind of a hint to that. It's like, oh, wizards are just people from the like future or what seems to be the future. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's gonna be really cool. And they kind of we didn't get that. I'm like, it would have been cool to see that perspective, like the wizard's perspective from Sword in the Stone.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
It
talking
also
about, Justin?
reminded me of vaguely. I was on a different thought in my head though, so I can't
No,
think
yeah, go
two
for it.
things at the same
I
time.
can't.
I'll just say-
I cannot do words.
It reminded me of Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, but in that book, the guy doesn't have powers; he just has knowledge. And so he
Oh
uses
wait,
that to, like, trick
yeah,
people and
yeah, yeah.
stuff,
That
so it's-
I bought that book for the barbecue when I went to Iowa. It was just a random book I saw. I'm like,
Oh, nice.
Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur. Cool. Buy it. Never read it, but you know. I
Oh
have it.
yeah, it's pretty good. I haven't finished it yet, but it's pretty good, and it's interesting because this book is sort of like that premise, except what if he did have powers? Okay, how do we explain those and that sort of thing. I will say with I've been bagging on this book for pretty much the whole time, but I don't know if this is true of all of Sanderson's books, but I like that he writes in pretty plain, simplistic language.
Yep.
So it makes it really easy to follow, which is nice, and he's got kind of a fun writing style. Like one of the lines in this that I don't know, I just really like the line. It was, my gut said I was the kind of fellow who trusts his gut. Stuff like that. I'm just like, yeah, I know what you mean.
He tried to be a bit more fun with the internal monologue of Johnny in this book. Yeah. And yeah,
That's
no,
a Sanderson style. Yeah.
He's been criticized for having a simplistic prose, but I wouldn't say it's overly simplistic. I'd say it's an approachable prose. It's not you're not gonna have to be an advanced reader to understand what he's saying. Most of the time.
I say screw all those people because like what you want to do is like get an author that really smells their own farts, and looking up every freaking word in the dictionary to be like, I'm sophisticated.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm trying to translate this story to you. I'm not gonna just like cover behind all these complex words so it makes it more difficult to understand. No, I'm communicating it to you so we can understand.
Joe, private bit of amusement. You like your camera paused when you were like this at one point. Yeah.
I did that on YouTube as well.
Oh, that's great, man. But yeah, no, there are things to criticize about the story. I think my main criticisms come from the fact that I would have just preferred a more fun story in this universe, following someone who is like I would have rather just followed a D-bag guy who's kind of a loser in real life who decides to become a wizard and to have fun in a random like dimension. I almost would have preferred that kind of story, but you know, that's again, I am kind of tired of the loser main characters we're focusing on in some of Sanderson's more recent work.
I also would. I don't know. Does he have any books in general? I like when there's bros, like a couple bros doing stuff, like actual buddies or friends or brothers or whatever, sort of like supernatural, that kind of setup.
Oh yeah, like Ryan was a piece of crap in this book, and this is like, you're not a bro.
Yeah, it's like yeah.
I don't think Sanderson does that.
Guys working together.
Yeah, I can't think of any.
No, he does.
Elantris.
Bridge 4. What are you talking about? And Elantris as well. And yeah.
What's that guy? It's like, hey, Cooley.
Oh yeah, that guy.
That and the main character from Elantris. I love that character.
Yeah, him and the prince. Yeah. No.
Yeah, him and the prince.
And like a lot of the members of Bridge 4. Is there a bigger bro in the entire Cosmere than why am I forgetting his name?
The
Lopen. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Oh, the Lopen. I kind of sometimes think the Lopen's a little annoying.
Oh, shut up.
It's Sanderson trying really hard to be funny. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, I love the Lopen. Sometimes I'm like, too much. All right.
So me and Joe see things the same. And you and Kahuna.
He wouldn't be the Lopen if he didn't consistently do the ridiculous. That's his thing.
I know. And sometimes he succeeds and Lopen is really cool, but sometimes it's like you're trying too hard to make the Lopen the Lopen. And it's,
But that's the whole point of his character.
That's the
is
whole
that
point
he
of the
tries
Lopen,
too hard.
Joe.
Like,
You're just,
that's what makes
Joe,
him
you
really-
have
I
some
know,
bad,
I
you have
know.
bad opinions.
It's not just the character;
time
it's
you're
also
just wrong.
Sanderson's writing. I feel like Sanderson's writing. I do
I
love
bet
the way
you
that
hate
he keeps
Wayne
on
for
like
watching
leveling
Wayne
up
as
on
well.
his oaths, though.
Wayne is maybe the most ridiculous character, like maybe the most ridiculous character ever written by Sanderson in some ways.
Who
Maybe
is?
besides Lift, because Lift is fairly obnoxious, even though I do.
I
like
can't
her.
stand Lift.
Yeah, see, like I have a limit with Lift. I don't like Edge Dancer. We didn't need a whole book based off of her perspective.
Well,
in my
it was
opinion.
also because was it first person or is it just because she was the main character?
No, it's just
It wasn't
it's
first
mostly
person,
it
no.
wasn't first. It felt more like first person.
Yeah, it just main character. No, I can stand her if she's not the main character. I can do a chapter with her, but no. What character did you say
Whoa.
really annoying? Not Lift.
Oh, I was talking about Wayne. Wayne is maybe the most ridiculous character in the
Wayne.
Sanderverse
Oh,
How's
from
there?
the second
Wax and Wayne.
Mistborn series.
era, Mistborn era 2. Yeah.
Oh, is that the Australian sounding guy?
Yeah, the
That's
guy
like-
woo's always changing accents and disguising himself. And I really like his character, especially after reading The Lost Metal. Objectively, I would say that the Mistborn era 2, it doesn't rate as high as my favorite Sanderson. The fourth book, era 2, The Lost Metal, I think is in the top 5 for me. That's a
Oh, wow.
really
All right.
I haven't
Well, I
read,
guess-
I haven't gotten through that series yet. I couldn't. I've tried twice.
first three I like because I like a Western and I like fantasy, and I thought he was a fun exploration of the future of the world. Book 4, I put up against Words of Radiance, Way of Kings, and Oathbringer. That's how
Wow.
good.
Hey, that's a Kahuna ranking though, so take that with a grain of salt.
You think
I
that
do-
Mistborn
I-
is better than Stormlight? You coot?
It
What do you mean?
is factually. Anyways, I guess we
You've
should
never
start to
been
wrap
so
this
wrong
up.
on anything.
I know we really want to talk about anything else besides this book. But- what are your guys' rankings?
Out of what?
Do a normal book ranking and do a Sanderson rating.
Okay. Grace, what about you? Ladies first. Under
Are
the
we doing?
bus.
Sorry, I'm new to this. Are we doing it out of 5, like stars out of 5?
Whatever
I do
ranking
out of
system
5,
you
but-
whatever ranking
Yeah.
system you use, I use an out of 10.
Oh, okay. Well, I would say 3.5 out of 5 stars. But I agree that it's lower down on my ranking of Sanderson books. Honestly, I kind of put it the same with Elantris, but I have a lot of problems with Elantris. So
Oh, okay.
Joe's like, fine, it's whatever, Baka. Anyway.
No, there's problems in Elantris. I did find it like entertaining. It's probably because that guy every time he was on the page, hey, please.
yeah, I think you just like. I think if you can find a character you like, you'll like forgive a lot in the book.
Yeah, Joe
Yeah.
is really picky about stuff in some ways. But Justin, what about you? First, just an out of 5 or out of 10 rating, and then a rating for Sanderson's books that you've read.
I mean, I've only read 2 of his books, so it's either going to be first or second best book of his I've read, or it's either the best or the worst thing.
Just do a ranking.
No, it's more fun to say. So I would say for me personally, just my enjoyment of the book, I'd give it like, I don't know, maybe like a 2 out of 5. Like there's something there, but who cares for the most part. But in terms of general appeal and things of that nature, I think like a 3.5 out of 5 is probably a fair score. I think most people like Sanderson that reads this book, I think they'll find enough in there to enjoy it. They'd give it a 3 or a 3.5. But me personally, I'd give it like a generous 2, I'd say.
Okay, Joe, you.
So I mean, well, here's the thing: there's a lot of people when they have a favorite author or whatever, they're gonna forgive way more than they probably should. But the way I think it is, and I do out of 5 for Sanderson level, I think this is 1 out of 5. His worst book by a large margin, not a small margin, large. And I think
Huge.
to the general audience, I think this is a 2 out of 5. Like I wouldn't really recommend this to anyone. The only people I would recommend it to are people that really like this style of book, and even then I would have a hard time recommending anyone. Like who would you recommend this book to, right? And that's usually where the 5-star is.
I would
right?
recommend this to someone who is a dedicated sci-fi author or reader or a dedicated fantasy reader because it rides the line between the two.
Yeah, but I
really
would
well.
say you'd have to be one of those people to even consider this book to be recommending, right? It's not to say that like they're going to even really like it, right? And especially if you're comparing this to other sci-fi things. So I'm like, okay, you really like sci-fi stuff. I'm like, you might want to read this. It's got some interesting elements in it. But like, if you compare it to all them, like, it's just, I don't know. I'm not recommending this book really to anyone, honestly.
Okay, is that so? What out of 10 again?
2 out of 5.
Okay, 2 out of 5.
2 out of 10, sure.
All right,
2 out of 10.
real quick, small tangent.
Oh, I'm Battsauce. I don't like the stupid books. I don't know. Anyway,
So out of 10 for just books in general, I'd give it a 6.5 because no, I'd give it a 6.4. 5 being true average. It is better than average fantasy book out there right now, but not by an enormous amount, especially when most of my Sanderson books are at least an 8, if not higher. So out of Sanderson books, like out of 10, I'm going to say probably 4.5, 4.7, somewhere in that range. It's lower than his average by a portion. It's not a bad book, so I'm not going to give it a 3 or less, but I do think it's like lower end Sanderson. Now,
So
again,
what's your
who I
overall
would
ranking
recommend
again?
who I would recommend this book to was because the book is not super long.
Mhm.
So if someone was interested, say there's a sci-fi reader who's interested in fantasy but doesn't know where to start, I would recommend this kind of book to either or because it's a good way to transition from like sci-fi or fantasy to the other because it's kind of has both elements.
And I think that's an important point because Sanderson's books, like his normal books, are very long. So if you're, because like my mom, she was asking me for a recommendation for a fantasy book that she could read. She's not really a fantasy writer, but she knows I like it. And, I said, well,
Illumination
some of my
Toolsmith,
favorites.
Tale of the Dunce Whisperer.
I recommended to her some of the Sanderson ones because they're some of my favorites, but she was like, this is too much for me, like, so I think it's important to think about that, Kahuna, like you said, for somebody who isn't a really deep, they just want something fun, shorter. They're not wanting to commit a month of their life to reading, the same book or something like that. So
Yeah, not like
What was your overall ranking again, Kahuna?
my what?
Your overall ranking?
For it, as far as just normal books go, a normal ranking out of 10 is 6.5, 6.
That just makes you a beta cuck.
I was wondering why you asked him that again. I was like, what is he walking him into?
Here's the thing with Sanderson. He doesn't really write
here's the
fantasy.
thing, I
He
can't sell
writes
my own
sci-fi.
books, but I can talk shit on other books.
I can and I will. No, Sanderson really just writes sci-fi. He doesn't really write fantasy. Like Stormlight Archive, like there's such a science to how the magic works. Even after
he has a hard magic system. It's not
but it's so hard to the point where it's like it's hard to even call it fantasy. It's just like sci-fi in a fantasy setting. Yeah.
No, I disagree because there are still elements we don't it's a hard magic system, but there are other things with a hard magic system. And there is still mystery, so you don't know everything, and therefore it does still feel magical at points, even if it also does feel like a science at points as well. Especially like Rhythm of War is where you start to feel it maybe the most, maybe outside of Second Era.
Sunlit Man. I'm Gracie wrote Sunlit Man, right? And it's just like he's like trying to figure out the scientific way of the words and everything of how it will work with the god and everything that's around the planet. It's broken down to such a science where it's like, I mean, I don't even know if you can really call this a hard magic system or just like a different type of sci-fi at this point.
Well, investiture is just energy, and it's
right
energy given purpose and form and identity by the will of other creatures and beings, gods and people.
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm saying. It's broken down.
It's not for everyone. If you prefer a softer magic system, like I'll give another good mainstream example that's going to be Joe Abercrombie with his First Law trilogy and the sequel trilogy. It's very soft. It's very dark and very old magic. It's more like Elric of Meldemonet kind of style, like Moorcock magic. I need to not.
Yeah, well, it's like anyway, like even with recommending it to somebody, it's like all of his magic systems are so intense that it's going to throw off the average reader or just especially newbies essentially. So it's just like
Yeah.
a lot.
Well, it's like for a recommendation, like I recommended Lord Otter, like for a stand. He wants to start reading some Sanderson, so I said, well, you want to start off with a one-off probably. So I'm going to say Warbreaker. Like of all the
Warbreaker.
one-offs, that's the one I recommend the most, and he's really liking it so far. It's one of the more creative magic systems. It's not my favorite, but it is one of the more creative ones because of how you have to choose to apply it. But
yeah, and then Otter's probably read a bunch. He is a writer himself. So, like, even recommending Warbreaker to some people with like when people hear the magic system being broken down into a number of breaths, so much math starts to get thrown at people that are just like, oh, this is too much.
yeah, but no, I disagree because like any fantasy. Video
I'm not saying
game
it's
or
too much for me. I'm saying for the like a newbie or something like that. This is why I'm just saying justifying why it's hard to recommend to a newbie.
It depends.
Of course,
it really depends on what they. No, you talk like it doesn't depend. That's why. I
know. It's just like.
Anyway, so we've had our conversation. Battsauce is obviously wrong. Kahuna, right here, number one, always. But no, guys, I've been Grace. Thank you for joining us again. I've enjoyed talking about Frugal Wizard, and we might as well finish it off. We've done 3 of the 4 secret projects, not including the 5th one that's coming out here soon. But we've done 3 of the 4, and so it would be fun for us to talk about Sunlit Man at some point.
Sunlit Man takes so much homework to get into. I just think for a book club, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, it could be. We could always just do it privately, also.
Yeah.
Well, or if we keep doing this, maybe further down the line when we've had a chance to delve more into some of the other ones that give that background. Because Sunlit Man was by far my favorite secret project, but also one of my favorites that he's written in terms of like short stories and stuff. I just thought there was a lot of fun stuff there.
That story was action packed, and it does slow down to an appropriate amount at times, but it was the most breakneck pace book I think he's ever written.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's wrap this up because we could talk back outside of this. So Frugal Wizard, you heard it here. It's a trash book. You shouldn't bother picking it up. Brandon Sanderson's a huge disappointment. That is our final words on this. All right, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks for watching, everybody. We've enjoyed the Frugal Wizard.
Yeah. And click the Discord if you want to participate or do anything with the show.
Participate in the brain data discussions that we have. Join us on the Discord. It's perfect.
Utterly silent.